What's up, brothers and sisters? Black Power, as always, giving honor to the Creator, the ancestors, my sister, Chief of Staff, Brother Harris Abdul, my father, my in-laws, and all of my subscribers and followers and listeners and viewers, and those who are fighting for the liberation and salvation of our black nation. Today, this morning, I was going to be a little more closer to the U.S. Capitol and the White House, which I'm about a quarter of a mile from it now, a little closer than I was yesterday. However, I want to recap on some things I discussed with you all yesterday. I like to say we because I like for it to feel like a setting where we're just building among each other. And I appreciate the input and the extra additional information that a lot of you all have, because I see that a lot of you all are very, very, very conscious, and you have an abundance of knowledge, because no one person can know it all. And so I appreciate the comments, I appreciate the love, I appreciate the support. I don't ask anyone for no donations or anything like that unless it comes a time where I'm really in need. So I work with what I have. So because I'm truly committed to my people, and I don't do anything for any type of monetary gains or anything. I'm not on the monetized agenda of YouTube or anything like that. And not to say that I don't need support and some help from time to time, but I make do with what I have, because it's going to come a time where we're not going to have anything. We're going to have to rely on some natural instincts in terms of resources just to survive. If we're not careful, if we don't unite, if we don't stand shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm with the system of racism, white supremacy. And so, a couple of things I wanted to discuss that I really couldn't go into detail yesterday with, because there was a lot of people that I was discussing as far as these agents, snitches, rats, provocateurs. And the reason why that is so important that we deal with this and understand who's who, so we can be able to eradicate those who are determined to die for white supremacy, those who look like us. And there are a lot of those who look like us that are willing to give their lives to the system of racism, white supremacy. So we have to come to the realization and understand that. Some are beyond reproach. Some blame give credit to their entire success, if you want to call it success, on the cracker, because you've been financially given some gifts. And so you credit him with all your success, and you've forgotten about the rest of the slaves. And always remember, at the end of the day, you are a slave too. Don't forget it. And that's the whole trick. They want to make you feel like you're not a slave, that you're better than the rest. You're not like the others. And so that's just a gimmick. That's just mind games, wordplay to trick you, to make you continue to be committed to support and defend the system of racism, white supremacy. So I was talking about Snoop Dogg, for example. I want to make it clear that he's not solely responsible for the assassination of Brother Tupac Shakur. But he knew that Tupac was going to be assassinated. He knew this, and so he began to distance himself away from Tupac and to try to make sure that Pac was in Vegas to be hit. Because why did he continue to keep asking Pac was he going to Vegas, and he didn't go? Then the Saturday Night Lives, you were supposed to perform with Tupac. You didn't appear, so Ice-T replaced you. And see, you have to look at a lot of things that took place surrounding the assassination of Tupac Shakur. Now, as far as triggermen, they've always tried to blame Orlando Anderson. And you still hear these niggas saying Orlando Anderson acted alone and based on the fight in Vegas, in which, if you notice, if you look at the film, Orlando Anderson stayed there. He didn't leave and go strap up and come back. That was a setup. That was just a setup in which Tupac fell for. And so we know NYPD, LAPD, the FBI, Homeland Security, and Las Vegas police all worked in conjunction to allow this assassination to take place. These were, no one will ever know who the exact trigger man was, but we all know who was involved by those that I just mentioned. And so they tried to blame Suge Knight, that Pac was leaving death row, and that wasn't the case. That was not the case. That was not the case. So the reason for the murder, if you are inquiring or may wonder why it was so important to white supremacy to annihilate Tupac Shakur, was that Tupac was running for city council, and he would have won a council seat, first of all. Second of all, along with Khalid Muhammad, Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad, rest in power, they were going to reunify the new Black Panther Party. And the Bloods and Crips had agreed to become Panthers. So Panther membership would have risen 1,000% or better. When you count the Crips and Bloods and the new Black Panther Party, you're talking hundreds of thousands of strong black men that would have been reprogrammed into understanding who was the real enemy. And so that was the main reason. And as you know, when they eliminate a particular leader, black leader, they tried to eliminate that entire bloodline. So Afeni Shakur, she was next. And I believe that Dr. Dre and a couple other people knew about Afeni Shakur being poisoned with ricin. This was a woman who was a strict vegetarian, who was running 3 to 5 miles a day, who was in excellent shape. And what the FBI what they did was send this nigga preacher, over there to sway her. And see, Afeni was caught asleep because she doesn't have a history of fucking with pastors. She doesn't have a history of fucking with weak niggas like the guy she had married. And so, once they were married, he wanted to sue her for half of her royalties that Tupac had left her. And the nerve of this nigga that he married her so he can get half of Tupac's money. Somebody that he never knew, somebody he personally did not like. And that was the whole scheme of things. And then all of a sudden, she pops up with a massive heart attack. And now, if you know anything about ricin, which a lot of our leaders have been murdered by this substance, comes from the castor oil plant. And it's odorless, tasteless, and it's extremely, extremely lethal. And so it causes heart attacks, it causes strokes, cardiac arrest, and the like. And so you have to understand the things that have taken place. Now, the only one that's left out of the Shakur bloodline is Pac's sister and his niece, which she has a baby by one of the outlaws. And so, you know, they have basically shut the outlaws up too. You know, you don't hear any noise from them. You don't hear anyone fighting to get answers in terms of the murder of Tupac Shakur. Now, the white devil, his name is on the tip of my tongue, but he was so close into cracking the case open for the murder of Tupac and Biggie Smalls that he was called in by the LAPD. Now, this guy was an LAPD cop as well. I think he retired. And when they called him in, they told him bring all the information that he had, in which he did. And he has, you know, all of a sudden, he has a mass heart attack in a police station and dies. Russell Poole is his name. And so you have to understand all of the things that have taken place surrounding that. You know, so I wanted to clear that up, you know, in terms of Snoop Dogg. And as you know, everyone went to jail besides him. And since he agreed to play ball and become an informant because his biological father was a CIA, FBI informant. And so that's why he always tried to throw people off and saying that they're his nephews and all this, his uncles and all this shit. You know, because he does not want the world to know about his biological bloodline. That he comes from a line of rats and snitches. And so, by him agreeing to be an informant, see, because you have to understand, informants are allowed to use drugs, you know, and when they're caught by people, by law enforcement who doesn't know that they are informants, all they have to do is make a call and they're released. And he's the only one that I know that can go anywhere, any place, anytime and get high. He's even gotten high with Martha Stewart on the television show. So, Dr. King, you know, I'm going to really, I need a little more time for Dr. King, but I'll give you a little more information than I did yesterday. The reason that with Dr. King, what happened with Dr. King was that Jesse Jackson and Dr. King did not get along. Jesse Jackson, his road dog was a nigga named James Bevel. I call him James Devil. And they would argue, run Dr. King out of meetings, piss him off so bad, you know, and Dr. King hated the both of them. And the day of the assassination, prior to that, Dr. King told Jesse Jackson, Muriel McCullough, James Bevel that they had to wear neckties to dinner. They were to eat dinner over Billy Kyle's house, who was a homosexual, and he knew what happened with the assassination, because he stated at the 30th anniversary of Dr. King's assassination, he was one of the keynote speakers, and he stated that at 6 o'clock he moved out of the way so they could get a clear shot to hit King. You don't have to believe me, look it up. And so that day, when Jesse was down in the courtyard, Dr. King had a change of heart and told Jesse he didn't have to wear a tie to dinner. Jesse's response was, yeah, you're right, because the only thing you need to go wear to dinner is the appetite. And that's when the first shot hit King in the jaw. And so by Jesse being in the courtyard, and he was spotted by Ernestine Campbell putting a silver object in the bag after the second shot rang out and coming up the steps. Now you can look in the book Orders to Kill by Dr. William Pepper, King's attorney, on page 245. It clearly states that. Now, Muriel McCullough, who pretended to give King CPR, was a CIA informant. And so this whole thing was set up. James Earl Ray was not the trigger man. It is believed that either Raul Pereira or the U.S. Army Green Beret sniper team that was on the roof of the firehouse fired the first lethal shot. Now, the way James Earl Ray was implicated is because he was riding with Raul Pereira, who was a CIA mercenary. Riding with him, and Raul told James Earl Ray to take the rifle upstairs into the rooming house. And Raul Pereira had on gloves when he touched the rifle. James Earl Ray didn't. That's how James Earl Ray was charged, because his prints was on the rifle. But he was not the shooter, because Coretta Scott King and the King family visited James Earl Ray, I believe, twice a month, put money on his books, because Coretta knew that James Earl Ray wasn't the shooter, in which James Earl Ray died in prison from cirrhosis of the liver. And Coretta Scott King became a vicious, serious conspiracy theorist. And so she had to go as well. She had to go as well. And when they attempted to assassinate her, the shot missed her and hit Dr. King's mother in church. But the shot was intended for Coretta, because of how close Coretta was to finding out who the real killers were in her husband's assassination. Now, Judge Joe Brown did the ballistics on the King assassination and determined that King was shot with a rifle and a handgun. Judge Joe Brown was given $2 million to back up off the case, and he was given a television show. That's how Judge Joe Brown ended up on television. But he still was attempting to reopen the case and investigate, and his wife told him that, what makes you think they can protect you if they couldn't protect King? And now, since Judge Joe Brown has become a conspiracy theorist, when I say conspiracy theorist, I'm not talking about someone that makes something up, someone that brings the facts. He's been arrested a few times. He's been threatened They have threatened to take his license from him. The Bar Association has threatened to disbar him, and the death threats, among a bunch of other things, Joe Brown is still to this day dealing with. So we have to know these things, and it takes intense research, not nothing that you hear. Personally, I've stayed in the Library of Congress for years, each and every day, because literally I could jog to the Library of Congress from here. And that building itself, is basically underground, because it's almost a quarter of a mile that you have to walk underground to get from one building to one side of the Library of Congress to the other. It's basically has an underground tunnel. So, extensive research, and it costs, several $100s, to have documents printed out, and it's been times that I was followed out of the Library of Congress because they know exactly what you are researching for. They have agents in there that are watching you everywhere you go. When you go into certain rooms, reading rooms, and you retrieve certain microfilms, they are monitoring you. So, with that said, the same way with Fred Hampton, the murder of Fred Hampton. The murder of Fred Hampton, whereas Fred Hampton and Mark Clark, defense captain Mark Clark, and Fred Hampton was Chicago chapter chairman of the Black Panther Party. They were feeding 3,000 people a week with their breakfast program in Chicago alone. And Fred did not want to get involved with the shit that was going on with Huey P. Newton and Eldridge Cleaver. Eldridge Cleaver, who turned out to be a flaming faggot, as when he went to Algiers and became a Roman Catholic follower of the Pope. And this is what I tell y'all. These motherfucking niggas that have all that mouth and sell all that fucking death, hollering the crack of this, the crack of that, most of them ain't gonna do shit. And Eldridge Cleaver was the loudest motherfucker, in LA, in the LA chapter of the Black Panther Party, as well as Bobby Rush in Chicago. They talk so much shit, and they were the hottest motherfucking agents in the party. There were plenty of agents. And what happened, Bobby Rush, if he did not personally do it, he knew of it and or participated in the dosing and administering the sleeping agent in the Kool-Aid, so that Fred Hampton, Mark Clark, and others would not be able to respond to the gunfire that took place in the wee hours of the night. And so, as a result of that, Bobby Rush ended up being an alderman and a councilman to this day. Now, can you, for instance, let me go back to Snoop Dogg. A Crip being a host of a TV game show. That's like, Tookie Williams hosting Jeopardy. And so this is to show you, how these how these niggas are serious. I'm talking about serious agents that are detrimental and dangerous, that have been responsible and has caused the deaths of some of our most profound, strongest leaders that in black history. Same with Marcus Garvey, and I'm gonna get with that. W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, who are celebrated Negroes, who just assisted J. Edgar Hoover in destroying the UNIA. However, same with Eugene Roberts, who was a CIA FBI informant, who pretended to give Malcolm X CPR, and was down on the assassination. And I have to question Elijah Muhammad's credibility too, because Elijah Muhammad went to Benny Williams, this white cracker that had ties with the mob, who owned the Baltimore Orioles at the time. He was a fix-it man, and Elijah Muhammad went to him, Benny Williams, this cracker, to see if he can get those brothers that were responsible for shooting and murdering Malcolm X out of jail. And brothers and sisters, like I said, we have to do some extensive research. I have done so many lectures stemming from 2005 on up, and I came out of the lecture circuit because I found that a lot of people were hustling. A lot of people were just doing it for money. And I had to, disconnect myself from a lot of people. And I've done, once again, I work with youths. I have a nonprofit organization, movement called the Street Law Soldiers. We've been active since 2004. And I work with ex-offenders. I do a weekly group with our older brothers that have served substantial amount of time in prison. Most of them have been over sentenced, like I was back in the day, and because we didn't know any better. And I work on trying to teach them who they really are, how important it is that they plug in and stand up and put the drugs and the alcohol down. Don't let pussy, be at the top of your agenda each day. Get out here and do something that's going to uplift another person that looks like you. Don't be afraid to talk to, our youth, because they're just a whole generation of pain, of young brothers that are in pain from fatherless homes, growing up on welfare, taking, watching their mother, take handouts. Some of them most of them have had addictive parents, and that they saw their mothers do horrific things, to get a drug. And then a lot of those youths, when they become drug dealers, they're so vengeful that they take their frustrations out on older people that look like some of the guys that used and abused their mothers. And so it's deeper than what you think. And when we say that we kill each other, black on black crime, it starts, white supremacy is at the core of this. Example, during the time of chattel slavery, when our ancestors were on ships, when they went down in the bottom of those ships and fed our ancestors that slop, they would feed every fourth person every other day. And so with that type of treatment, after 5 months, 4 to 5 month voyage on those ships, our ancestors were at each other's throats and became so selfish for their survival that adrenaline and that mindset that was in the DNA of our ancestors was passed on, and it still exists today. That's one of the reasons why we have so much disdain for one another, and we love the slave master. But we have to teach our babies the truth. Stop telling the babies to love everybody, because everybody doesn't love them. At the end of the day, we all know that we are the most hated people on the planet. And if you allow your children to listen to people like Charles Barkley and Michael Vick, and Ray Lewis, Oprah Winfrey, and Tiffany Haddish and Kevin Hart and George Foreman. I mean, it's tons of our people that have taken the side of the oppressor. And we have to stop pretending and acting like this shit doesn't exist. It was a time before I had to settle down and get busy with the research to be able to help teach my people. I was ready to take this cracker's head off at any moment. And I wasn't one that committed a whole bunch of black on black crime. My parents were radical. And I've never had any good relationships with any crackers. Never. Every encounter that I've had with a cracker has been a negative, detrimental, fatal fucking relationship. In prison, my legs were broken by a fucking two Aryan motherfucking correctional officers. And I've seen the food stamps. I've seen my parents beg these goddamn so-called white imposter Jews not to evict us. And not only my parents, that's all we used to see in the hood. Is these crackers coming through, taking the little bit that the community had. And so, we have to be honest and tell our babies the truth. You don't have to tell them to hate. But if you read any of these scriptures, any of these, the Quran, the Bible, the Torah, you'll see that those who follow those doctrines, they will see that their leaders, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, they hated certain shit. And they were physical with motherfuckers to some degree. So, and that's why Christianity has become so passive and so fuckery and so, and so fucking faggoty, because they teach that Jesus, was this robe-wearing faggot that let motherfuckers slap him around, and he walked up a hill and let motherfuckers nail him to some motherfucking wood. But if you read the scriptures properly, how, the Old Testament, when he, turned over tables and all this shit and smacked motherfuckers around and warned people that he was a fucking revolutionary. But we don't want to accept that. Just like these black churches. None of them have a crispy blue-black Jesus in their church, with the exception of one church in D.C., and that's Union Temple. The rest of them have a Ethiopian-looking or a fucking white Howard Stern-looking fucking cracker in their church. And why is that? Because of the self-hatred that we have towards ourselves. The self-hatred. That's how deep it runs. And why wouldn't you want to honor and worship a God that looks like you? So you can make a connection. Why would you want your God to look like your slave master and your oppressor, your supervisor at work, the fucking terrorist police officers, and whoever, the motherfucking crackers that work security and Walmart and all this type of shit? That's enough for me right now, brothers and sisters. I hope you learned a little bit from me. Please send your comments if you have any. You want me to appear and do any radio talk shows or whatever, newspaper articles, send me your information in the comment section, and we'll discuss how we can make it happen. Hotep, Black Power.